One. Hey, Whitehead SEO Group. How are you doing this evening, guys? Nice to see you. I'm sitting here with an honorable guest of mine, Doc Sheldon, a huge expert with enormous amount of experience behind his back, and we'll be discussing very interesting topic today, migration from HTTP to HTTPS protocol. So it's a very hot topic because Google pushed several changes throughout the past year, especially, which were strongly suggesting webmasters to finally move to this encrypted method of, blogging and selling on the internet and buying everything. So HTTPS is becoming even more important topic because it's becoming kind of a mandatory thing these days. So we'll be discussing it with Doc. Hi, Doc. Welcome to our show. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Nikolay. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Everything's great. Lots of questions coming from the group, from the two of us that we decided to put them in the sheet with questions. So interesting 1 hour ahead of us. So before we begin, can you say a few words about yourself, or what have you been up to recently?
Oh, well, I've been doing a lot of work on this very topic that we're going to just brought to bear. An awful lot of sites are scampering now to convert to HTTPS, and that's a big part of my business. Our agency specializes in technical SEO, so we're doing things to make things secure, both from the user standpoint and from the site standpoint, in terms of hackers and malware and whatnot, and speeding things up, trying to make sites as fast as possible. So those are two services that we've just been stressing tremendously the last couple months, and that's been keeping me pretty busy.
Yeah, I guess so. So now that you mentioned some technical SEO issues, how important do you think is the technical aspect of SEO these days? We're mentioning speed, we're mentioning HTTPS, which is the secure part of the picture. So everything has to do with user experience, obviously. But what is your point? What does your client tell you in terms of how prepared they are for all these changes?
Well, in terms of how prepared they are, I'm blown away by how many sites are still taking 18 seconds responsive. Things that they're just not paying any attention yet to, things that most of us have been watching for the last 2 or 3 years and stressing. An awful lot of site owners out there either aren't aware, or they've been putting it off and just hadn't got around to it until now. Suddenly it's urgent. Do I think that the technical is important? I think it's extremely important, and I'll tell you why. You go back 4 or 5 years, Google was saying they had about 200 ranking factors. Okay. That number now may be 300, 400, 500. We really don't know. But there are more factors now. Things like schema, things like HTTPS, all these things add in, and that means that every factor now is a little bit less impactful. So being able to just build lots of links and rank is not going to be enough. You have to be able to talk to the search engines without ruining your presentation to your users. And the way to do that is through technical SEO. Schema markup, for instance, open graph markup. Those are many ways you can do it. But you also have to make your site fast and secure against hackers and shouldn't attack and whatnot. So all those things I think are extremely important, because you can't win the game anymore with 1 or 2 things. You have to do dozens of things to even have a chance to compete. And technical SEO, in my opinion, is one of the biggest areas that has been neglected and can yield a lot of results.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my own opinion as well. And sometimes before you jump into building links, which a lot of people are obsessed with, they think that links are some kind of panacea that can save you from all kinds of trouble and can give you the long desired rankings. But I think that to tidy up, to clean up your own house, figuratively speaking, is your job number one, right?
Exactly.
All right, great, Doc. So shall we move to the questions now? We have quite a few, actually 13 of them. So let's begin with some basics, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of guys need some direct, simple explanation of what HTTPS and SSL are. What do they do? So can we say some really simplistic words about them so that the broader audience can understand it?
Well, sure. Well, basically, HTTPS is your hypertext transfer protocol over TLS, which is the transfer sockets, transfer secure layer. And all that basically means is that now you are encrypting all the transmission both ways of data between the user's browser and your site's server. That means that if they have to enter a password, anything that they enter will be encrypted, so that if somebody can intercept it, they still can't decipher it. They can't read it. Mm-hmm. And that's the way to protect the users. Don't let the word secure confuse you, folks, about this making your site secure against hackers. It's a whole different type of security. This is protecting your user and their data. It is a legal requirement if you're taking financial information, credit card payments, for instance. It's a legal requirement in most countries, certainly in the United States, that you protect that with encryption. But and just as well as if you're actually storing any of that data on your own servers versus simply transferring it over to a bank's or PayPal's payment page. But now Google has turned it into a mandate of sorts on the part. So basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take standard HTTP pages and protect the user by moving those pages over TLS.
Yeah. All right, great. So the next question comes naturally. So obviously a lot of people are now obsessed with this migration process. We're going to be discussing in the next question about potential deadline for webmasters to migrate to HTTPS. But before that, a little history. So why do you think Google decided to push webmasters towards HTTPS in the first place? How did this whole story begin?
I think it's basically because as the internet has grown, obviously so has the abuse. I mean, it's turned into a hunting ground for hackers. People are publishing lists of stolen credit card information, social security numbers, for purposes of stealing your money, for purposes of stealing your identity. They publish lists of, we just recently had a big one from Equinox, a major credit reporting agency, lost hundreds of millions of users' sensitive data. That got published on a hacker's site so that anybody could come in there and use it. And that's the sort of thing that made Google realize that we have to do more. They can't do it, so they're trying to pressure us to do it. And I agree with it in concept. I think that it needs to be done. It needs to be secure, because there are, unfortunately, because now it's so easy for anybody, any 15-year-old kid can build a website and go on WordPress.com and put up a site without a great understanding of the security, and especially keep information out there, not realizing that a tidbit here and a tidbit there, another tidbit over there, they put all this together. Somebody has a pretty good picture of you and where you live, what you do for a living, where you work, how much money you make, what car you drive, you name it. So I think Google is trying to protect the community, the users, society. That's not just a pie in the sky view. I really think that that's their motivation. It also, of course, reduces their liability, because if they show sites in their results that are insecure, and somebody goes to one of those sites, or hundreds of people go to some of those sites and get ripped off, and it reflects poorly on Google, which will help them sell fewer ads, which will make them less money. So there is a business consideration from their standpoint too. They need to protect us in order to protect their own reputation in order to keep selling ads. And that is basically the cog that makes their machine go round, selling ads.
Yeah, so they're kind of putting it like a win-win situation where they're making internet secure for all of us, and they're making more profit out of their AdWords and organic searches.
Well, but of course they're not mentioning the profit aspect. That's kind of under the table, but I mean it's fairly obvious. And you know they've been talking about this for a long time. You know, I've noticed several years ago that they say things generally 18 to 24 months before they actually do them. When it comes to things like this, where they're pressuring people to do things. You remember the big My Blog Guest fiasco when they started talking, back when Matt Cutts was still the player, and they started talking about being careful with guest blogging. They did that 3 times in 6-month intervals before they finally hammered and Smarty and me at the same time, okay? My one and only penalty was from that My Blog Guest fiasco. And they try to tell us, and then they'll try to reiterate it. Finally, they'll tell us, we're serious, you better pay attention. They started in August. That's 3 years ago, buddy, that they started talking about setting up HTTPS being a good idea. And they've strengthened their comments over time. Now, we're 3 years down the road, and now they said in October. And that's next month. And that may be as little as 2 weeks from now. It may be the end of next month. We don't know. They weren't that specific, but it's coming.
Yeah. That actually brings us to our next question, which is regarding this deadline in October, which we are not certain as to which date it will actually happen on, but it's coming real fast. So what if we don't follow this deadline? What if we surpass it and we're still without HTTPS installed on our website? What do you think would be the outcome of such a thing?
Well, in the first place, we're going to see what we already see now. A pretty little green padlock, okay? Every user out there isn't aware of that padlock. Some of them don't even look at the address bar, but many of them are aware. And I think more and more of them are aware now than they were even weeks ago, much less months ago. So that is going to become an increasing problem for any site that is not secure, because now it's going to actually have a warning up there. It's going to say this site is not secure. Now, in some, they're testing. I've seen a couple of samples where they're actually in the SERPs page. They actually say they return the result, but right next to the result, they'll say this site is not secure. That's going to be a red flag. You're just like waving a red flag in front of a bull. That's going to scare a lot of users off. They're not going to want to click on that page because they don't know how insecure is it. Is it going to get a virus on my computer if I click this link? You know, they're not going to land on the page. Google is saying that pretty soon, you know, eventually, and I read that, I mean pretty soon, they're not going to wait to see if you have input fields to say this site is not secure. They're going to say, if you're HTTP, they're going to say it's not secure. Right now, it's just going to be if you have an input field, but that doesn't mean a password or a credit card number. That can also be a search block. It can be a login for members. Any sort of text input field will constitute justification for that warning. So that's why they're doing it, and they're going to be bringing more pressure when they stop even worrying about whether you have an input field, and they're going to put every single site that doesn't.
Yeah, we have a note coming from one of our members, Eunice. I have actually seen non-secure on a few websites that I visited recently. I even read dangerous on one of them. So obviously it's even happening right now. Probably.
In fact, I bought a domain. I'm sorry. I bought a site about a year ago that had been infected with malware. And about 6 months ago, I finally decided to do something with it. And that's when I found out it had been infected and, in fact, had a manual action against it. I hadn't even gone in and looked at it. And when I did a search to pull it up in the SERPs, I got that same thing, a big red block warning me that this site is infected with malware. So they're taking it very seriously.
Yeah, luckily for all of us, because it's for our own protection, of course. So the next question, do I need to set something in Google Search Console after I migrate? So we're going to be discussing a bit of a step-by-step process later on, guys. So bear with us. But this is one of the random questions that came from you. So basically, your Google Search Console and Google Analytics must have been set up to the HTTP version before the migration. So, Doc, anything we should know after we migrate so that we don't lose our traffic data, so that the traffic data that is being shown is not only not lost, but also accurate?
Well, first of all, the first thing you're going to have to do, just like now, if you've decided you want to use the www version of your site, you still have to build both the www and the non-www properties in Search Console. Create two more, HTTPS www and HTTPS non-www. Okay, and that will allow those sites to be recognized. As far as your analytics and your Search Console, you'll have to verify those sites over again, because Google sees the HTTP version, HTTPS version as two separate properties. They're two separate sites as far as they're concerned. So you have to re-verify in order to get that reporting started, for instance, in GA and in Search Console. You're still only going to have to make the one preference selection in Search Console, whether you go in www or not, and you're still going to have to set up a redirect elsewhere to direct your traffic over to the HTTPS.
Yeah, I have a question on the site. So sorry for interrupting you.
Go ahead.
So once you move your Google Search Console data to HTTPS, once you verify your HTTPS property, is there a way for you not to interrupt the data, especially in Search Console, Google Search Console, or you should at some point stop it and for it to start from scratch after the HTTPS is being set up? Because I haven't found a way. I mean, I started from a brand new practically a brand new account.
I have seen some discussions, people saying that there are ways to do it, and I have not tried any of those ways. Basically, everything that I've seen that's had any success basically involves saving the HTTP data, exporting it, and then starting from scratch with the new HTTPS version. And if you need to track that data, you need to do it, for instance, in an Excel spreadsheet or you can combine and access a database and start looking at the progression. But that's the only way that I have my doubts. I don't know. I haven't tried them.
Yeah, me neither. I think that what you just mentioned is probably the only way for you to store your information on some kind of external file and do some analytic work on your end. But within the search engine console, I don't think it's really possible at this point. So this moves us to the next question. People are worried, concerned about the duration of such a move from HTTP to HTTPS. So I think this question has 2 points of view. So one of them is actually the technical process of the migration, which I don't think is that long. Again, I'm not an expert. You will say with the highest certainty. But the other one is the collateral damage, let's call it like this, that you should be prepared to see. So what is your take on the duration of this process?
Well, in terms of the technical process, it depends, of course, a little bit on a WordPress site, for instance, well under an hour to actually perform everything that needs to be done. If you have a site with a few thousand pages and an awful lot of mixed content, then it's going to depend upon how you go about it. And later on, when we get into some of the nuts and bolts and steps to be followed, I'll give you some options that can have a major effect on how much time it takes to clean it up and get all that mixed content taken care of. But that's from the technical aspect, implementation. But when you start talking about the collateral damage, that very much depends, like so many things in SEO, on the site itself, and to an extent the host, and what your crawl rate is. If your crawl rate is rather poor because your site has not been seeing a lot of 10,000 pages, it's obviously going to take longer than if you had 1,000. So yeah. There's just no way to answer that question. There will be an impact. You will see some drop in traffic and some drop in rankings. Now, here's the good news is that since Google has said that HTTPS is going to give a slight boost to a site, the good news is that in theory, down the road, whenever it's all caught up again, you might actually be a little bit better off than you were to begin with. But whether that's going to be measured in weeks or a year or so, that's just impossible to answer. Now, I have heard of cases that took a handful of weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, and they were basically back where they had started. I have not seen anything less than 3 months, and I haven't done anything long enough ago that I would be able to. GPS conversion was less than a year ago, and those couple sites that I did first recovered months ago, but they were very small sites. They had a couple dozen pages, and there was not a big problem with crawl budget, and I did some things to expedite that. And there are things you can do to help get things crawled faster. There's a lot of things that can be done behind the curtain to help, but the bottom line is Google has to get around to looking at those pages. They have to recrawl and re-index them to replace the HTTP version in their index before you're going to start seeing any recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of overlaps with the next question, which is regarding the potential drop in traffic, which I think everyone is probably going to see. Maybe there are some exceptions, but I think the general rule is that you will see some kind of a sickness period for your website, if we can, figuratively speaking, talking about such. So if yes, when should a webmaster, of course, very roughly speaking, it depends on multiple criteria and factors, but how long should the recovery, in quotes, recovery process of your traffic last?
Again, it's just totally impossible to give any kind of even an estimated answer on that, Nikolay. I would say that, when I do a site, particularly if the traffic is really important to me, if I'm getting my income from this site, I'm going to be much more concerned about it. So I'm going to keep a very close eye on it. I probably wouldn't worry too much. The first few days, I'm going to go in there and see if I'm seeing some activity, make sure that I did everything right and they are, in fact, recrawling my new pages. And then I'm not going to really expect to see anything in less than a month or so. So maybe after a month, I start checking it more often. And you just kind of gauge it. If you start seeing some new activity in Search Console, then you might want to start looking more often. I mean, I have had some sites where I was going in there 2 and 3 times a day to try to ascertain whether I was actually seeing some results from what I had done to speed things up. And I've seen other sites where I've not bothered to go back more than every 2 weeks. It's just going to depend. But I wouldn't expect to see anything in less than a month.
Yeah, That's a great answer, actually. I think that's what the audience is hoping to hear. Some kind of a average period. Of course, it might depend on multiple factors, as we already mentioned. Another question which I just had from one of our members today. So he was seeing cached versions. He recently migrated to HTTPS, like a few days back. And he started to see already the HTTPS versions being indexed in the SERP. But his homepage, for some reason, didn't have a cached version button. So basically, it's as if it was there as a result, but you can just click on it as a user. You cannot see the cached copy. And this has been going on for a few days now. So he was kind of concerned, obviously.
I've never seen that. I have to think about that one. That's rather odd. I've never seen that before, Nikolay.
Yeah, me neither. It was a strange thing to see, really. But I told him that probably he should wait, maybe to refresh the homepage, to check his internal structure, whether there are some newly generated errors or something within the Webmaster Console, even though it's just recently being re-verified under the HTTPS version, but still it already started to show some data. So
I'd almost suspect that the fact that it's not showing a cached version is a separate issue. I think, without any idea how that would happen or why, I think that what I would probably do is simply go in and submit to Googlebot, try to get them to crawl the new HTTPS page, and just keep watching it. And it's possible that when they recrawl and reindex that home page, that they're going to show it then in the cache.
Yeah.
It could possibly, theoretically, I suppose, they could be in the midst of a transitional period where they said, okay, this page is no longer valid. There's a new one here to index. And he happens to see it between the time they wipe out the old one and they actually write the new one. But that's, if it's been going on for several days now, that doesn't sound very likely, because that's,
very,
very fast process.
Yeah, I see. So it was happening at the same time as he was seeing some decrease in traffic, and it was overall. I mean, it wasn't only the traffic he was getting on his homepage; it was across the board. So maybe something fishy is going on there. I'm suspecting some kind of other technical problem, maybe some redirects or something that is confusing the Google bot. All right. So the next question is, what's the SEO impact after migrating from HTTP to HTTPS? Now, we mentioned some kind of a potential boost that Google was talking about. I haven't really seen such for my own website, but then again, I wasn't getting that much traffic back in the day when the migration happened. So I can't really speak in general about this process, but people are with a lot of hopes. They say, okay, so I'm really struggling to get a bit more traffic, so maybe a migration will make sense at this point, and maybe this will be my step to the next level when it comes to gaining more traffic. But is this really the case? Can the boost be that significant, or we are talking about really slightly almost non-visible change?
Yeah, and I would agree. I think, first of all, when you listen to Google's wording over the years, you realize that, especially when Matt was here, they carefully chose their words. And when they say a slight boost, that rings to me to be something that they thought rather carefully about the wording on. They didn't want everybody, they wanted everybody to convert to HTTPS, but they didn't want to create a mad scramble, everybody thinking that now all I have to do to rank for my search terms is to be HTTPS. So that's probably why they said slight. But they typically, regardless of what some people may think, they don't typically lie to us. They may omit some things, but they don't lie to us. But I don't think that boost from HTTPS is going to be enough to really be discernible in most instances. I certainly wouldn't expect to jump from page 3 to page 2 because I converted to HTTPS.
No, not really. I don't think so either. All right, so the next question has to do with SSL. So is there any issue using free shared SSL. So first of all, again, I'm no expert here, but I think that when it comes to security, it's not a very wise idea to really spare some of your budget on this issue in particular. I think that at least I've come across during my audits on some, I don't know if that's the right term, fake SSL certificates. They don't pass the verification process. So if you run them through some tools that check whether everything is all right with the SSL, they show some red flags there.
Well, first of all, I think to be able to answer this question, we need to talk about the type of SSL that exists. There's basically three classes of certificates. The first is a DV, which is domain validation. That basically means that you're going to go, they're going to check some domain registry, all of them probably, but they're going to want to know where is this particular site registered, this domain, and they're going to verify that that is the site that is serving that certificate on their server. Okay, in that case, then they'll let you use their shared certificate, which would be, for instance, Let's Encrypt is one that's on many Apache servers, and it's free, and it's just domain. It simply is verified to match the domain name that server is showing you in your browser. Okay, then there's another level up, which is what they call the OV, which is owner verified. Now they're going to go to the registry and they're going to see that not only does the certificate match this domain, but also that Nikolay Stoyanov is the owner of that domain. And he's the owner of this domain. Therefore, okay, so that's much more secure than the free. And those are not free. Those are you're going to pay a nominal charge. I have heard as little as $40. I think you can find them relatively readily for about $100 a year, or under, I should say, 100 or under. And then the next level, which is even more secure, is what they call EV. That's extended validation. And here they basically do a background investigation, if you will. They're verifying the fact that this is definitely the domain that we're serving on our server, that it's owned by this individual, that it's a valid business entity. They're going to check with government agencies. You know, it may be the county that your business is registered in, or the city. It may be, if you claim to be an LLC or a corporation, it may be your state secretary of state. But they're going to verify the existence of this business and its legal existence as an entity. Okay, that means that now as a user, when you go to one of those sites with an EV certificate, you know that there's a much better chance that it's a decent site. It's not some guy in Nigeria trying to sell you something that he has no intention of shipping. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
It gives people a much better feeling. It's the most trusted of the three. A lot more trusted than the owner verified or validated rather, and that's that portion of the question. Now, the impact of using a free shared SSL, I disagree with you a little bit, because I think for some sites it's just fine. I use it on many of my sites, but there are sites that we don't handle any financial information. We don't take payments. Anything I do is done via PayPal, and it's done on the PayPal site, not on my server. And we don't collect any PII or personal identifiable information. So I don't need, either legally, I don't need to have it because of the nature of the data that we handle. And then because I don't have any input fields aside from a couple sites that still have a search box, okay, I don't have any input fields that would require me to be shown a site not safe or not secure warning if I wasn't HTTPS, but I don't really want that. There's so many reasons to convert to HTTPS. Why would I give my competition an advantage over me? Why would I want to jeopardize my users' information? There's almost a dozen different reasons to do it. So for me, for those sites, a free Let's Encrypt certificate was fine. There's no risk involved in it. And it satisfies Google, at least for now, and I'll go back to that a little bit, but for now it satisfies Google, and it's going to make users feel more secure and safer and not chase off potential readers. And going back to what I said, at least for the time being, I can see a possibility of Google at some point in time saying, you know what, Let's Encrypt, we're not going to recognize those anymore. If you have a Let's Encrypt certificate, as far as we're concerned, you're HTTP. I don't say that because I see anything wrong with Let's Encrypt. I just think that they're liable, Google is liable to want to make things safer yet. Now, if you recall, a couple of years ago, it was an expensive process for small site owners to have to consider buying a certificate. And then Let's Encrypt resolved that issue for so many of us, myself included. I didn't want to have to go out and buy a dozen certificates, or worse, a wild card that was going to be tremendously expensive. So I can see Google wanting to make things safer, let's say to the OV level, the owner validation. Yeah. Potentially, not for any particular reason, not because of anything that I've seen them say or hint at, simply because to me, it kind of follows their line of thought. Let's make things as safe as we can. And let's face it, OV is safer than DV.
Yeah. So to sum it up, basically, if you're just blogging, at the time being, it's more than fine to stick with the lowest layer of...
In my opinion, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but if you're selling some stuff, maybe the second or the third level will be best for you.
Yeah, and I don't think the third level is only going to be for like enterprise level. Obviously somebody like eBay, Amazon, obviously they're going to want EV.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a lot of business online to new users, particularly that don't know you by reputation or by previous service, then it's more of an issue. Yeah. But if you're not actually handling sensitive information on your site, then there's no reason to worry about anything besides the free, like Let's Encrypt offers.
Yeah, great answer, Doc. So the next question is a bit of an opposite to the previous one. So what if I decided to remove SSL? Will it affect my rankings and traffic? Now, I don't know for what reason, but probably it's just, a question of a theoretical question, so to say.
I would say absolutely it will. I mean, anytime you do something substantial to your site in terms of how Google sees the site, it's going to affect your rankings and traffic. And so, just like going from HTTP to HTTPS will affect it, so too would going back to HTTP. You're basically just migrating again. So yes, it absolutely will affect it. How much? It depends. I know that everybody hates that answer, but it really does depend so much upon the site and its history and how much traffic it has now. 10% of 10 visits a day isn't much. 10% of $1 million visits a day, that's substantial, okay?
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't risk it. Let's summarize it like this.
I can't imagine why in the world you would want to go back to HTTP anyway.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, all right, fair enough. So the next question is actually the question I was referring to in the beginning when I told people that we're going to create some kind of an easy-to-follow step-by-step process. So how to migrate to HTTPS properly? Now, let's get a bit into the nitty-gritty of things. Any step-by-step guide, some easy-to-follow steps that you absolutely have to follow so that everything is done by the book?
Well, the most important is actually, if you're using Let's Encrypt, it's literally a 2-click process. You go to your control panel, you find, usually under security, you're going to find the Let's Encrypt icon. You click it, and then it's going to come up and it's going to give you a short dialog box, and it's going to ask if you want to install, and you're going to click it again. And then it takes 20 to 30 seconds on most sites to install. And Let's Encrypt is a pretty darn good process. It covers most everything. But if you, for instance, if you've hard-coded a link to an image into the content of a post, and you hard-coded it originally as an HTTP link, it's going to show up still as an HTTP. So when you try to visit that page, you're not going to get your little green padlock. You're going to show mixed content. Now, there's 3 different ways to address this. If you have a very small blog with a couple dozen pages and maybe an image on each page, you might decide to just go through manually, find all of those images, and add the S to the HTTP, because Let's Encrypt will fix the URLs in your media, in your media library. So all you have to do is go into the post and change, add the S into the link, and it will still call the image, and it will be a secure link. And when you get all of those little things taken care of on the page, now you'll get that green padlock. Okay, that's one way to do it. There's another way to do it, and it's a plugin that I wasn't too sure about, but I contacted the developer and talked to how they do that. And that plugin, I'm looking quick for my notes. Here we go. It's called Really Simple SSL. It's available on WordPress.org. It's free. And basically it goes through and it finds all of those pieces of mixed, hopefully all of the mixed content. And that will even include little things like your icons for your Facebook and Twitter account, for your RSS feed, remark, your everything. It will find them and it will change them. Okay. Now my concern was that it might be doing a redirect, individual redirects on every single HTTP, which, then on a page you might be adding a couple dozen redirects into that page. That I didn't want to recommend that. So I contacted them and I said, no, that's not how they do it. They actually find the link and edit the link individually. So that to me sounds like a good option if you want to rely on a plugin. The third one is a little bit more elegant, and it depends a bit on how comfortable you are with messing around with your code, but I like it. And it's a PHP script called search replace db2.php. You can get it on GitHub. In fact, when we get done here, I'll give this to Nikolay so we can actually put the link in. But you upload this to your root folder through your cPanel or FTP, and when you run it, it's going to go out and it's going to fix everything. Okay, in your database, it's actually going to go into the database. It's going to rewrite every HTTP it finds to an HTTPS. Okay. Yeah. Now here's the ringer with this particular script. It doesn't have any built-in protection or security. So somebody that were to come into your, break into your server and find it would have the ability to go into everything on your server and change it. They could change your database, your passwords, everything. So you don't want that happening. So you use this thing and you immediately delete it. Okay.
Yeah, that's a very important note.
It works good. I mean, don't even consider using search replace DB2 without making yourself a big red note on your monitor. Go back and delete, because if you leave that, it's very dangerous. Only because somebody can find that and it gives them a back door. Basically, it's a back door. Okay.
Yeah.
But it works very well. I've used it. I love it. And if you've got a huge site, particularly, I don't know on the Really Simple SSL how well it works with a site that has 10,000 pages. I don't know. It might bog down. I mean, some plugins do have an issue handling that much volume, but I know that this DB search replace works beautifully, and it's quick. I mean, it's literally seconds.
Yeah,
and then you delete it.
So make sure to delete it.
That's cleaning up the mixed content, and that's very important, because if you don't, then you left the job half done, and people are not going to see that green padlock. Right now, Chrome and Firefox are going to start sometime in October. They're going to start showing actually on the page in the address bar, this site not secure. Okay, not just in the search, but up in the address bar. And Google has said that at some point they're going to start doing that, whether you have an input box or not on the page. So you want to get rid of that. They're also saying that at some point they will probably stop putting it only in the address bar and also added adjacent to every single text input box. So you'd have that under your login box, under your search box, under your subscribe box. You'd have this little red warning every place. That's going to scare people off. That's going to have a lot more impact on your traffic and conversions than the migration ever did. So that's you've got to take care of the mixed content. Now, the way to check it is relatively simple. The first thing I would do is I would go through your navigation bar, follow every single page, okay, on the nav, and make sure you got that green padlock, okay. If you don't, make a note to fix that page. Find the mixed content on that page and fix it. Now you're going to find that some things are out there. Some third-party functions, for instance, you might have some third-party site monitor scripts in there that are not HTTPS, and there's nothing you can do about those. I believe it's actually, I think one of the Google APIs is actually still an HTTPI, if I'm not mistaken, and that's going to cause you an issue. We're going to take it on faith. One of the guys in one of the Hangouts said that they're not going to hold that against the site. Take it on faith. But if it's a third-party piece of mixed content, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. If it was on your contact us page or your payment page, then I'd be worried. But if it's on your About Us page or your home page, I wouldn't want it on the home page either, simply because that's probably the first step in the door that most of your users are going to hit. You certainly want to be secure, appear secure to them. Other things that need to be done, you're going to have to go into your htaccess, and you're going to have to do a force redirect. You're going to do a 301 from HTTP to HTTPS. Okay. You're also going to have to go into your WordPress dashboard. You're going to have to, on the dashboard, the WordPress address and the site address need to be changed. They're showing right now HTTP. You need to change that to HTTPS. Otherwise, when you try to log in to your site, you're going to be trying to log into a page that WordPress thinks isn't this site. You're going to be one or the other. You're either going to be telling it go to HTTPS and it's going to think it's HTTP, or vice versa. You're going to try to go to HTTP and it's going to redirect to HTTPS, and WordPress is not going to be able to get you there either. So you have to do that in the back end, in the dashboard. And as I said earlier, you're going to have to go into your search console and set up those other two versions. And don't forget your XML sitemaps. It doesn't do a lot of good to do all this and leave your sitemaps still pumping out HTTP versions, okay? That needs to be corrected and then submitted. Because remember, Google sees the two versions of the site as two separate sites. So you're going to have to you're done. Just like anything you do to your site, check and double check. Go through your site navigation and make sure that all your pages are showing up green bar. Take a look at any of your comments. Sometimes in your comments on a post, you might have a link. So if you're looking at, maybe you're using Firebug or whatever, however you're looking at your content on your page, if it's showing you having mixed content, you can't find anything on the page or in the post that's actually not HTTPS. Take a look at the comments. Maybe somebody dropped a link in the comments to an HTTP. Okay.
Yeah. That's a ton of value. I'm really very happy with this explanation, because it will help a lot of people. Just a quick note from my side, because I'm not a techie guy. I had to migrate to HTTPS a few months back, and actually my hosting provider helped me, because there was such a plan under which if I up my plan to the next one, and it was just a few bucks per month more, so it was a bargain. They promised to migrate it all for me. So it was a really painless transaction. I just, upped my subscription from, for example, $5 to $8 per month, or 8 to 10 or something like this. And they did all that it had to be done from their side. So if some of our, visitors right now are really scared of this process that you just explained, even though it's not that hard, But still, if you are scared of these guys, maybe you should ask your hosting provider whether there is such an option for them to migrate it for you, right, Doc?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I believe you and I use the same hosting company, mostly SiteGround.
Yeah.
Those guys are fantastic. I highly recommend. They're not the cheapest host out there, but they got a couple things going for them. They've got a wonderful service philosophy and very, very knowledgeable people. And they're not with EIG, Endurance International Group, which seems to be trying to monopolize the hosting business.
But, a funny fact.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Proceed.
I just, they would definitely help you out. And also, we're short fused here. People that are going to do this need to do this rather quickly. If you end up in a problem, I'm not here to make money off anybody. So if you end up with a problem, a stumbling block, reach out to me through the group. I'm there. Contact me on Facebook. I'll be glad to help you out, answer a question. I'm not going to send you an invoice for that. Okay.
Great.
I'm mercenary, if not that mercenary. I don't have time to do it for you, but I certainly would be glad to help you learn how to do it. And really, don't be too intimidated by it. It's not that big a deal. It's, for the first time that somebody's not technically oriented, it might seem rather intimidating, but it's really pretty simple. Let's Encrypt helps a lot. Really simple SSL helps a lot. And those two things right there are going to take care of 99% of what you need to do. You're just going to have to change your address in the back end, and you're going to have to go to your Search Console and Google Analytics. And, those are easy things to take care of. So I strongly suggest you do it. There's a lot of reasons that it needs to be done, not the least of which that Google is not going to be as kind to you as if you had done it. So if I could help anybody, reach out to me.
All right. Thanks, Doc. That's huge help for each one of our members that are potentially struggling with this right now. Great summary of the step-by-step process. I hope that a lot of people will find it useful. So we are entering the last 10 minutes or so. So we have 2 questions left. This one is, what if I need to migrate to another SSL provider? What should I know? Any potential issues that the guy might be facing after such migration to another certificate provider?
Well, first of all, it shouldn't affect your traffic or rankings at all. Basically, this is almost like changing a plugin or changing a theme. I mean, it shouldn't have any impact on the operations of your site. The key there, of course, is don't let this one lapse and then wait 3 days and come and get a new one, because in that 3 days, you're going to be in deep water, okay? But as long as you don't let it lapse, changing from one provider to another, like, for instance, let's say you went with Let's Encrypt and then decided you wanted to upgrade to another certificate, but you're going to go to Komodo, okay? It's a very transparent process. Simply, in most cases, you can simply reach out to your hosting provider and say, okay, I'm changing certificates. Here's the information, and they'll do it for you. And if they won't do it for you free, like most would, then they would probably charge you $20, $30. Okay, not a big deal. But that's all that has to be done. It just has to be changed on the server. You'll get new salts and keys, which are the encryption mechanisms, and those are easily gotten, and they're free. Okay, so it takes them probably less than 5 minutes to actually perform this for you, so I would expect most decent hosts are going to do it free.
Yeah, most probably. Yeah. All right, great. So to wrap it up with one final question, which actually comes as a nice conclusion to our session right now. Would there be a reason not to migrate a site to HTTPS at this point?
Okay, this is the question I was waiting for, because I get a chance to rant a little bit, okay?
Absolutely.
The long answer, only if you don't care that your competitors are going to get a boost that you won't get. Only if you don't care that browsers like Chrome and Firefox will be displaying this site is not secure in the address bar for any page that has input fields that are loaded over HTTP. Only if you don't care that those same warnings may be posted adjacent to any input fields on the page. Only if you don't care that a Google engineer recently said, eventually Chrome will show a not secure warning for all pages served over HTTP, regardless of whether or not the page contains any sensitive input fields. Okay. And only if you don't care that your user's personally identifiable information may be jeopardized and intercepted by others. Yeah. And only if you don't care that some users are going to see that you're not secure and be scared off and you're going to lose that potential customer. Now, if you have, for the time being, if you have no input fields on your page, that includes login, subscription, or search fields, then you may still get an address bar warning, but, even though you don't have input fields, but at least you're not going to get hammered, okay? And if you don't handle any financial transactions on your site for the time being, you certainly have no legal requirement, under law to do it. And, no, if none of those make any difference to you, then you don't need to do a transfer. But my point would be, the short answer really is yes, you need to. There's no reason not to, because you're going to get some slight ranking boost out of it. You're going to make your users more comfortable. You're going to make the search engine more comfortable. I do want to bring one thing up that I hadn't mentioned earlier, and I've heard a lot of people say this, and I think it's almost hogwash. A lot of SEOs say that HTTPS makes you so much slower. Okay, I had a site that was loading in about 16 seconds, which is about 15 seconds longer than it should have been, and I got that thing down to under 2 seconds. It was like 1.97 seconds average page load, okay? And then I converted it to HTTPS. And it increased 0.13 seconds.
Wow, even more awesome.
30 milliseconds that it increased it. And that site had about 50 pages. So 130 milliseconds I can live with, okay? Now that's not inconsequential, particularly if you've got a nice mobile site that's loading in 600 milliseconds. Okay, now you're 700. Now you're, instead of 2/3 of a second, you're at 3/4 of a second. I know it's not insubstantial, but it's also not a showstopper. So I call it almost hogwash simply because, technically it will increase your page load, but practically it's just insignificant in most instances. Now there are other instances where, if depending upon the scripts that are present on a page, it could have a very significant impact. If you've got a lot of jQuery, for instance, trying to backfill all the security steps on a page that has 16 scripts on it, you could conceivably add a couple of seconds page load to that page. I could see that, but that's going to be rare.
Yeah.
And I have yet to find a WordPress page that I can't get to load in under 2 seconds consistently. But it's not out of the box. I mean, you have to tweak it. So, those are the things that I think make HTTPS a must-do. It takes a little bit of time. It's a little bit of time to do it. Go push the 2 clicks, and you're 99.9% done. Go spend another 10 minutes in Google Analytics and the Search Console, and you're done.
Yeah.
And by the way, I will be publishing a list like this of the to-do steps, kind of somewhat of a tutorial, a guideline, if you will, sometime in the next week or two, and I'll be publishing it. I'll make the group aware of it so it's available to folks.
Absolutely.
But, I think it's important that everybody that can do this and everybody that can't get help to do this. And I'm offering my help to anybody that hits a stumbling block. So do it, get it done.
Thanks, Doc. That's very convincing and very kind of you for this offer to any member of ours that is having some issues with their HTTPS migration. So our time is up. Do we have 2-3 more minutes for one live question that I see here?
Pardon me.
All right. So It comes from Gordon. Any benefit from fixing HTTP to HTTPS errors manually versus a WordPress plugin? So I think he's referring to what you just said a few minutes back about the ways you can do it with a plugin or manual.
There's a couple of things. One, if you happen to be, Gordon, somebody who would like to learn a little bit more about the technical aspects, then it's a great opportunity to go in there and do it. It gets you a little bit more comfortable around. The average blogger out there couldn't write a link. They would have to use an applet to drop a link because they would have no idea how to do an ahref. Okay, but if you're not in that mode, then the learning is probably not attractive to you because it's not that big a deal. The other is that I like to minimize the use of plugins as much as possible. And I had a colleague a couple of years ago. She just kept beating it into my head, to get rid of plugins. When the function of that plugin can be hard written into the code of your child theme, then why slow things down with a plugin? So I like to try to minimize, and doing it manually totally removes the need to use a plugin at all. Doing it with the search replace DB2 the same way. As long as you remember to delete it, I keep harping on that. But why would I slow my site down by having another plugin? And it's not just that. Any plugin, even the very good ones, particularly the very, for instance, talk to Joost de Valk, who does the Yoast SEO plugin. He'll tell you he's got a plugin that's in use. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of sites are using his SEO plugin. As a result, hackers are constantly trying to find exploits in his plugin because they know that if they can find an exploit, that opens up hundreds of thousands of sites to possible invasion. Okay, that means that he has to update his plugin. I've seen 2 or 3 in a week sometimes come out. And he does a great job of staying on top of that. Thank goodness. But so if you have a popular plugin, it is almost at more risk because it's going to have more people trying to find a backdoor, an exploit that they can use to back their way into somebody's site or thousands of people's sites. So, and if it's not a terribly prominent plugin, there's always a chance that it was written by somebody who really doesn't know that much about what they're doing, and it's insecure. So I like to avoid plugins as much as I possibly can. I do use some, obviously. Some of them I don't have the coding ability to replicate. I'm still learning a lot of code. So, but those that I can, I'll go in and make the changes myself. And that would be one advantage, Gordon.
Yeah, and that's a great tip to finish our session with. So, Doc, thanks a lot for this huge information, very, very useful to all the people that are preparing to this deadline in October. So a few final words about where people can find you to get in touch with you. Where do you stick around more often?
Well, I'm in the White Hat SEO group, and Facebook, it's just at Doc, is it Doc Sheldon or Doc.Sheldon? I forget. I think it's Doc.Sheldon.
Yeah.
On Facebook, and I'm usually logged into Facebook. You can also catch me on one of my sites is intrinsicvalueseo.com, which surprisingly enough is an HTTPS site. Okay, you might have predicted. That's the 2 places that I'm most likely going to be spotted. I'm not going to publish an email address, but I have a contact form on the page, and like I say, I can always be reached through Facebook. And if you can't find me for some reason, ping Nikolay or Gareth or Chase. Those guys know where to find me.
Thanks. Thanks for the recommendation. Hopefully only serious people will get in touch with us because you probably can't believe the amount of spam. I was about to tell you can't believe it, but I'm sure you can believe the amount of spam we're getting.
I believe it.
All right. Thanks, Doc. We had Doc Sheldon as our special AMA guest tonight. Thanks, Doc. I will be seeing you in the White Hat SEO group. And thanks, fellas, for all the questions that you've sent previously and live here. There was just a few that we weren't able to tackle in, but the 1 hour has already expired. So I'll be seeing you around in the White Hat SEO group together with Doc. And till next time, guys.
Enjoyed it. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks. See you guys.